And now to our conversation. Nigeria continues to strengthen its position as a major player in Africa's trade landscape. This week, Nigeria hosted the meeting of the Afcfta Council of Ministers responsible for trade, with Nigeria's Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, Jumoke Udwole, emerging as chairperson of the Council of Ministers. What do these milestones mean for Nigerian businesses, exporters, manufacturers, and the wider economy? And how can businesses take full advantage of the opportunities created by the African Continental Free Trade Area? To help us answer these questions, we have the National Coordinator of the Afcfta, Patience Okala, who is also the Special Advisor to the Honorable Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, Legal Trade and Investment Policy, to have you with us on Business Express, ma'am.
Thank you for having me. Good afternoon.
Great. Nigeria has just hosted the Afcfta Council of Ministers responsible for trade, with a Nigerian emerging as chairperson. How significant is this development for Nigeria and the continent?
So what Nigeria hosted is way beyond just the 18th meeting of the Council of Ministers of Trade on the African continent. What we have hosted this week is what we tagged the Afcfta Week. The reason is because we've had 3 continental events that are related to the Afcfta, related to advancing the objectives of the Afcfta. We've had them hold in Nigeria as host of these events. On Monday, we had the Her Afcfta conference. This is a conference that was focused on women-owned and women-led enterprises. The Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, the Nigeria Afcfta Coordination Office, and the UNDP, as well as the Afcfta Secretariat in Accra, came together to hold this conference. The conference brought over 200 female entrepreneurs together in a room from 8 African countries, 9 if you count Nigeria, because we also had a very high-powered delegation there. So the object of that conference was to help the women understand the architecture of the Afcfta and let them appreciate the opportunities that inure from the Afcfta. We also had conversations around access to finance, capacity building, and hand-holding our women businesses through the opportunities that inure under the Afcfta. So we had women from 8 African countries. We had women from Benin Republic, from Togo, from Botswana, from Uganda, from across the African continent, sitting in a room, bringing their wares, displaying their wares from fashion to cosmetics, different items, and forming very reasonable connections that could help them scale under the Afcfta. So that was on Monday. On Tuesday, we had the 18th Council of Ministers meeting for Afcfta, which comprises the ministers of trade on the continent. And like you rightly pointed out, our very own Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, Dr. Jumoke Udwole, came up as the chair of the council for the next 1 year. That means Nigeria will be sitting on the driver's seat on the implementation of the Afcfta on the continent. Nigeria will be a key part of determining the agenda for taking the Afcfta forward, for ensuring that African businesses in general and Nigerian businesses in particular benefit from the Afcfta, understand the Afcfta, and create the kind of networks that will help their businesses scale. Now on Wednesday, these first 2 events were in Abuja. And on Wednesday and Thursday, Nigeria also hosted the 2nd Afcfta Digital Trade Forum, but this time in Lagos. This Digital Trade Forum, we had over 610 registrants. The forum is the 2nd of its kind, and I'm sure you know that Nigeria is the co-champion of the Afcfta Protocol on Digital Trade. And I think this is a natural position for Nigeria to assume, given the fact that we are the continental capital of innovation, the continental capital of fintechs, of content creators, of the entire ecosystem around digital trade. So on Wednesday and Thursday, we had over 600 digital trade operators in a room. We had policymakers from across the continent. We had ministers. Just let me pause to say that for the whole of this week, we have hosted at least 20 African ministers on the African continent on the back of our Afcfta week. The Digital Trade Forum was an opportunity for the operators to engage once more. Nigeria already has that leadership role, not just because we are co-champions, but because of the leadership that we have shown in innovation, in talent, in skill, even in the infrastructure to enable digital trade thrive on the African continent. The reality is that the future of trade is digital, and Nigeria is taking leadership in that capacity.
Great. You have mentioned some of the priorities of the Afcfta, and I know Nigeria has operationalized its Afcfta coordination office and submitted its tariff concessions. But let's bring it down to earth for a moment. For the average Nigerian exporter, how much of this progress is actually translating into ease of doing business across African borders?
I'm glad you asked that question. For a number of years, a lot of negotiations have been going on regarding the Afcfta. The framework agreement itself was signed, but a number of negotiations were going on around the protocols. Those negotiations are now concluded. I think there's only one protocol that the Assembly of Heads of State and Government in February this year asked the Afcfta Secretariat to negotiate, and that process is yet to commence. So the focus is now on implementation. And like you rightly, in April of last year, we gazetted our provisional schedule of tariff concessions for trading goods. This means that Nigeria has now opened up its market for the preferential rates that apply under the Afcfta for our exporters. So they export their products out of the country, and then the tariffs that apply are the preferential rates under the Afcfta. But we do realize that operationalizing it goes beyond policy. So shortly after that, we opened an air cargo corridor between Nigeria and East Africa in consultation with Ugandan Air. So that corridor was opened. It was a collaborative effort with the UNDP, with Nigeria Customs Service, and of course the Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment. The Honorable Minister led that charge. So that air cargo corridor made it possible for our exporters to export their products now under the tariff regime of the Afcfta, but operationally under preferential rates with Ugandan Air. They tell us from the feedback that they bring to us that the cost of exporting their goods has reduced significantly by 50 to 70%. So that is one thing that we're doing to make it easier for exporters to take advantage of the Afcfta. 3 weeks ago, under the minister's charge as well, we opened another air cargo corridor with Rwanda Air. So this air cargo corridor is targeting not just the East African market, but to open up the South African market. We're currently in conversation and consultations with Air Algiers to open up the North African market. So we are operationalizing. It's not just in policy. Aside that, what is priority for us in the Nigeria Afcfta Coordination Office for 2026 is the simplification of the Afcfta architecture. We realize that a lot of Nigerian businesses, and indeed businesses around the continent, do not really understand what the Afcfta is about. And because of this, we have deployed 3 strategic initiatives. The first one is the subnational engagement, P3 subnational engagement, P3 standing for public, private and press. So that is a platform through which we undertake the explication of the Afcfta architecture for our businesses to understand and take advantage of. The second thing we did was to come up with a simplification tool. We call it the ABCs of doing business under the Afcfta. So this tool we have, the Honorable Minister had inaugurated under the President's directive last year, a central coordination committee for Afcfta implementation in Nigeria. She chairs it, and my office also alternates for her. It has over 27 ministries, departments and agencies, and the private sector. It has NASIMA, it has Manufacturers Association, it has the Women Chamber, it has youth groups, all working in alignment, coordination to ensure that Afcfta works for Nigeria.
Right.
Now that group...
We've spoken about the opportunities. And I want us to talk about the challenges now. Many Nigerian businesses, especially MSMEs, still struggle to export due to financing standards and logistics challenges. How is the Afcfta secretariat addressing these barriers?
So it takes me back to the conversation I was having just before you asked this question. In using the platform of the Central Coordination Committee, we're able to reach out. We have specific designated officers from the customs, from NEPC, from NIPC, from Standards Organization, NAFDAC, as members of the Central Coordination Committee. We have undertaken a number of capacity building workshops to explain to the exporters what the processes are. In dealing with our subnational engagements, we find that what it is that there's a disconnect between the processes of some of the regulators and the way the exporters understand it. So we have had this year already 3 sessions, 3 big sessions, but of course multiple sessions as the exporters reach out to us. We also produced a simplification tool that helps to break down what the processes are and then helps to handhold the exporters through this process. That tool, we have published it in 6 Nigerian languages. It's a multilingual tool, 6 Nigerian languages, so that everybody understands it. Hausa, English, Yoruba, Pidgin English, proper English, and even in Arabic. And now we're going to do it in French to ensure that we handhold the exporters through this experience. We also have in the NAC Afcfta office, we have designated officers that reach out to exporters. So if you talk about access to finance, what we do is to determine across the continent with our DFIs, with partners that work on Afcfta, Afrexim Bank, AFDB, to find out the facilities that they have to support the small and medium enterprises. And then we're bringing that to their knowledge and enabling them with the information, the trade information they need, the hand-holding capacity to access these kinds of funds. So that is what we're doing.
All right, the federal government has launched a nationwide export campaign beginning with Kano. Why was Kano chosen, and what does that aim to promote, and how does it aim to promote export and the Afcfta?
Why was Kano chosen? The design is to have it in the 6 geopolitical zones. And my suspicion is that if we started in any geopolitical zone, you will ask me why was that zone chosen. But we have to start from somewhere. Kano is the commercial nerve center of the Northwest region. So we started from Kano. We're now going to the Southeast, where we traverse through the 6 geopolitical zones. We're going not just to sit down in a hall and have another conversation and speak a lot of grammar, but like we did in Kano, we went down to the export corridors to see what their challenges were in real time, to experience the process of export and the challenges they face. When we were in Kano, we had 470 businesses participate. Of those businesses, we had a good number that were women-owned businesses. And in fact, let me just drop that. We had an association, a women association called Dogara Dakai. So I hear that in English, it means resilience. They had 270 women-owned businesses in that room, asking questions, interrogating with customs, with NEPC, with Standards Organization, with the quarantine services. All these players in the Central Coordination Committee were there to answer questions, to help them fill their forms, to make their applications and handhold them through that process. It gives me great delight to say, since we started engaging in this coordinated manner, the number of certificates of origin that Nigeria has been issuing for export under the Afcfta has increased astronomically, and which is a clear indication that Nigeria is taking advantage of the Afcfta opportunity.
All right, Ma, before I let you go, what message do you have for Nigerian entrepreneurs who are yet to explore opportunities under the African Continental Free Trade area, very briefly?
So my message would be that government, both continentally and nationally, has set in place the bedrock, the policy, the enablers to enable you scale under the Afcfta. It is up to the private sector to take advantage of these opportunities. We see other countries taking advantage, in some respect, but Nigeria, as the leader in intra-African trade, we expect our private sector, if anybody should benefit from the Afcfta, our mandate is to ensure that it is Nigerian businesses first.
Fantastic. A very big thank you to you, Mrs. Patience Okala, National President of the Afcfta, for sharing your thoughts with us on the program.
You. National Coordinator.
National Coordinator.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Moving on.